So you mentioned rehypothecation and naked short selling in the book,
Mhm.
but you sort of yeah didn't spend very long on it. You sort of like a
Yeah.
paragraph or something. And
This book is written for, for my sister or my mom or any educated person who, is not going to kind of geek out on finance. I'm happy to talk about all that stuff for a long, long time because I do geek out on finance. So the short interest in GameStop at its peak reached about 140% of the float, which is an extreme, extreme level. So it's like having a really overcrowded theater full of short sellers in one little narrow door, right? If anything goes wrong, if anyone drops a cigarette and the carpet catches on fire, you're going to have a problem. And so there's like a lot of hubris among these hedge funds in being in that position. And then I tell you that this is all told to me on background, so I won't say who it was, but some of these people were aware that it was being talked about on social media, and they didn't care. They didn't take it very seriously. Um, and yeah, and then there was a massive short squeeze, and even bigger, really, than what you see from the net short interest, because the original funds that were in there all got out very quickly. So by the 27th or 28th of January of last year, those funds had lost so much money; they were completely out of their positions. Uh, Melvin Capital was out by the close of business on the 26th. And so the reason that the short interest didn't go down more is that other funds saw this happening and couldn't believe how much GameStop and these other companies had gone up, and they wanted a bite at the apple, and they just wanted to make some quick money and sell the stock short at what they saw as elevated levels. And then Elon Musk came in with his GameStop tweet and just set the thing on fire all over again. And then they also had to run for the exit. So it wasn't all just one body of short sellers there. It was two waves basically.
mm. So the just for sort of interest to you perhaps the I have looked at a number of different sources and different like reportings of like what the level of short interest was. Now there was some people were reporting it. I think it was at SIBO Global Markets were reporting at the end of the year of the end of 2020 that the float was 261%
Mhm.
short sold. There was another one from September 2020 that had it at 292%. And the point I'm trying to make here is not that like, well, first of all, I think it's kind of weird that all of these different places are reporting different things, but that I guess
Mhm.
that's just part and parcel of a very messy financial system.
Mhm.
But like if we're going to be idealistic, we wouldn't want that, but that's not the world we live in. But essentially, like you talk about like this rehypothecation being like fine, basically that it's not a
Right.
big deal, and to me, that there's two issues that I kind of feel are quite big that should be looked at as a result of this saga. And it's like first of all, it's like when you can have like two to three and there are other lawsuits that allege like much higher numbers of times the
Mhm.
float being sold short. That's a real difficult one to
Mhm.
get out. It's the argument that they make is that it's seriously devaluing the investment made by the buyer, whether it's a retail investor or a pension or a hedge
Mhm.
fund, is that when there's three times as many shares in circulation as should exist, that it's of serious detriment to the value of that investment. And like for me, that feels like it feels like the explanation is like, oh, rehypothecation just happens and that's it. It feels like the
Mhm.
outsized damage of that is bigger than perhaps people are willing to accept, and that the SEC have written a lot of papers about how
Mhm.
naked short selling can damage the market.
Yeah.
And Dr. Suzanne Trimbath wrote her entire PhD thesis and book
Mhm.
on about this issue. And yeah, I don't know. It feels like there's maybe something bigger to look at here in the
Right.
naked short selling thing as a lesson and something to look at for the way we regulate financial markets. Or do you think
Yeah, I mean
that's
that's certainly possible. In terms of the different calculations out there, it just depends how you calculate it. You do know how many shares are sold short, but what percentage, and you know what the float is. But then the what do you consider the actual float, right?
mm,
And so that will yield different percentages. I will say that whether it's 140% or 260%, that's probably pretty excessive. And so, perhaps the SEC should, that a red light should go off, and they should say, listen, this is an excessive and dangerous level of short interest, and there should not be, it should not exceed X amount, because there's no reason for 140% or 260% or whatever you want to call it of a company's shares afloat to be sold short. So there's you probably, since you've read a lot about it, that in the United States it used to be possible to nakedly short stock, or much easier, before rules instituted in 2005 called Regulation SHO,
Mm-hmm.
and those have since been tightened. There was a couple of rounds of tightening of it, one in 2010, and then one I think later that year. But basically, that says you have to locate a share. But I think that there are obviously there are holes there, because the prime brokers who are in the business of locating a share, maybe they located the same share twice. In the case of reapplication, so a short seller says they located a share, they sold it. You're the buyer, you put it in your account at Charles Schwab, and then somebody approaches you at Charles Schwab, and there's no label on that stock because all the stock is fungible, meaning they're all exchangeable for one another. And somebody says, oh, I see you have, they don't come to you, the customer, of course, they go to Charles Schwab, and Charles Schwab says, oh yeah, no one's borrowed this. You can borrow it. They'll lend out some percentage of the stock that their customers own. That's how, by the way, Robinhood is a major lender of stock, because that's one way they make money. That's one way you can have $0 commissions. A lot of their clients happen to own, guess what? GameStop and AMC, around the time of the GameStop squeeze. So when somebody wanted to borrow GameStop or AMC, they're like, oh yeah, that happens to be a very widely owned stock among our customers. Yeah, you can borrow some. Is quite a high borrowing rate for that. I hope you don't mind, because most stocks these days, the borrowing rate is 0.5%, and they were lending it out for like 23% a year, I think, at the peak. So they were making some nice money lending that out. It's just part of their business. That's how you don't pay commission. It's not free to trade. They say it's free, but it's not really free. Like running Robinhood costs money, and they want to make a profit too. So yeah, so that's the business. I certainly wouldn't disagree with tightening up these excessive levels of short interest. But making it impossible to short stock would be taking it too far, in my opinion, because that would harm retail investors and harm markets overall.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, for anyone that you make a very compelling case in the book that when you restrict short selling, like when you ban it outright, that markets do worse. And I guess that's probably because of, correct me if I'm wrong, of this phenomenon actually you talk about towards the end of the book, where, if Wall Street is making money no matter which way the market is going, as long as it's not that, like, I think it's you quote Jordan Belfort, it's not as long as liquidity is not drying up and the markets are stagnating, as long as it's going one way. Thanks for making it all the way to the end of the video. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and leave a comment for us in the comments below. Let me know what you thought and if you'd like to see more of this from the show. Thank you, and we'll see you again next time.